Check out FlipsideGaming.com for all your gaming needs. Use the promo code HEROES to save 10% on all orders over $10 and support the channel at the same time. Hey there, this is John from Heroes and the Legends. Welcome to part 5 of our 6-part Masters 25 full set review, where today we're going to look at all of the green cards and the rest of the multicolor cards that we haven't looked at yet up until this point. Now, if you've been watching the series, you kind of know what to expect here. This is a limited set review. These are all reprints. We kind of know what they do in constructed formats already, maybe with the exception of some of the new cards that are entering Pauper for the first time. But today's about sealed and draft strategies, the different archetypes, where the cards best fall, things of that nature. Quickly before we get started, though, just a really fast reminder, if you're looking for a way to support what we do here at the channel, just check out the description below. You'll find a few ways. Our Patreon page is linked down there. You'll find some product links for Amazon as well. If you make any purchases on Amazon, once you go through that first link, we'll get a small percentage for the channel. And then finally, Flipside Gaming still offering a promo code for our viewers. Hopefully save yourself some cash, support the channel at the same time. Always appreciate those things, as well as everyone just watching the video. So thank you very much. With that being said, let's get into it. Quickly, we're going to go over the archetypes for green. Now, we've talked about all of these in previous videos, so I'm going to go kind of fast this time, but if you've been watching the series, you're probably already aware of what green does and how it combines with other colors. Basically, in a nutshell, green is going to be very creature heavy, as you would imagine. Basically, just think the classic Magic style of green. That's what you're going to see here, and that's what's true in all of the colors for Masters 25. You do get a little bit of ramp. Sometimes that comes into play. There's a little bit of token creation, which might play well with Selesnya. So that's what green's trying to do. So as far as the color pairs, like I said, if you go white and green, you do get some light go wide strategy and token strategy there, as well as some ways to buff the team a little bit. So that's what you're trying to do with green white. Green blue, you're going to be a little more controlling. What's nice about green blue, though, is there's a lot of complements that go on between the two of them. As a matter of fact, there's a lot of combos you can pull off. It's almost like if they were trying to create a dual color that had some rich combos, almost like a combo archetype. It's almost what they did here. Now, if you don't have one of those combos, can you still play Simic? Yeah, you actually can, because there's still some control elements in blue that work well with green, because you can still try to work out one of your large creatures. That could be the win condition while you control the board, that type of thing. If you go green-black, there's some light graveyard shenanigans going on. Green will complement really the core of the graveyard mechanics that you find within black. And together, again, they do have a lot of strong creatures and evasive creatures, which can make a very good combination. And then finally, you have Gruul colors, green and red, which are very creature-focused. Red's going to bring the lower curve creatures as well as some direct damage to clear the path. Green's going to bring a little bit of ramp and some of the larger creatures and ways to perhaps enhance the team here and there. So together, they're going to work very well and kind of be a little more stompy. So now that you know that, that's what we're going to be referring to as we go through the individual cards for today. And we're going to start off with Inox Survivalist. Now, this is the first time this card appears in Pauper, as it got moved down to Common. As far as Limited goes, though, this is a really solid card for you. One thing you're going to notice about green compared to the other 4 colors we've already looked at, they do have better creature size, especially at the common and uncommon level. I mean, for the most part, you see a lot of small creatures in this set. Small creatures sometimes with very good abilities, but small creatures nonetheless. Green changes that a little bit. So here you do have a 2-1 for 2, which feels pretty standard for what's going on in this set. However, with the Megamorph ability, this could become a 3-2. And it also has the special ability attached to it when it's turned face up, destroy target artifact or enchantment an opponent controls. So even if you're not main decking this for whatever reason, you just got better 2-drops and you don't feel you need this at the time, then remember, you could always board it in if you come up against a problematic artifact and enchantment. And there are some very good enchantments in this set especially. Ambassador Oak. This is a 3-3 for 4 that also adds a 1-1 green elf warrior token to the battlefield, so you're really getting 4-4 for 4 mana. When you look at the breadth of this set, that is incredible. I mean, you would feel like in normal, like standard Magic today, this would feel like probably a run-of-the-mill curve-filling creature. In this set, this actually feels like it's going to bring a lot of power and toughness to the battlefield for what you're paying for it. So this is going to be very good, and notice it is at common, so you'll be able to pick these things up. Also, it helps you go wide, which is always nice, especially if you're in green-white, maybe even green-red. Ancient Stirrings. Not every deck's going to need this, but if you want to dig a little bit for a colorless card, this is going to help you. So maybe you have a really good artifact that's important to you, or a really good land, like Rashad Port or something. But more generally, what you're going to do with this card is use it when you're trying to go deeper with colors. Maybe you're splashing a third, maybe you're going full on 3 colors. A card like this is going to help you dig deeper and make sure you hit those land drops and hopefully find that color you need. That's the best use for this. If you're not in the market to do those things, then yeah, it's going to sit in your sideboard. Arbor Elf, classic ramp card here that you can pick up at common as long as you're using forests, of course, or enough forests. That way you can simply cast this, untap the forest. Basically, you get the extra mana every turn that you use it, which is pretty amazing. So this card's awesome. Kind of wonder why they didn't put Llanowar Elves in here, I suppose. But yeah, this works just as well for our purposes in this set. So there you go. And also, there's a pretty interesting combo you can do with this, as well as Utopia Sprawl and Freed from the Real, which we saw in blue. You can actually give yourself unlimited mana with those 3 cards. And then, if you have something to do with that mana, wonderful. For example, a Wild Heart Invoker, another card we're going to see in a little bit, is something you could pour that mana into. So, not something that's easy to pull off necessarily, but something you want to keep in mind. Azusa Lost But Seeking. This is a sweet card in some ways, but you have to be kind of realistic about it too. I mean, it's a fantastic card for some modern decks, obviously, but in limited, it's going to be very high variance for you. Let's say I get this card, for example. It's a rare, and I want to anticipate having 2, and I wouldn't run 2 either. But if you have 1, maybe it's runnable in some builds. You're trying to cheat ahead of the curve, and if you can pull it off, it's awesome. Like on turn 3, you play this, and you have an additional land to play, then wonderful, you get ahead of the curve. If you do have 2 additional lands, that could be good, but it also might be a little overkill, because yes, I'm really getting ahead of the curve, but I'm probably mana flooded at that point if I'm playing my 5th land or 6th land on turn 3. That could be perhaps a situation where I'm not really finding anything I need to find. So this card was kind of a bad draw for me anyway, because I'd rather actually have some sort of board presence. So that could be a situation where this card is sort of bittersweet. But every once in a while it will be good. A lot of the time, though, you're going to draw this when you either don't have additional lands or later in the game when you don't need additional lands on the battlefield. And you're just going to be like, wow, this is just a dead draw for me at this point. It's a 1/2 creature for 3. That's not going to feel really, really good at all. So, yeah, I don't know if I play this a lot of the time. There are decks where I really am concerned about cheating curve maybe and ramping. And if I'm all in on that plan, then running 1 is probably fine. I could see myself looking at my 24 playables, though, and just being like, what do I cut? What do I cut? Azusa, see ya, because you're just too conditional. Now, this does combo well with Courser of Crewfix, which is another rare. You won't have that opportunity often, but that would be a strong incentive for me to play this. Brood Hatch Nantuko. This is a morph card. It doesn't feel good, a 1/1 for 2. That's not great, but the morph's alright. I can get a 2/2 if I play this for the morph cost of 3. Alright, and then maybe later I can surprise my opponent and get myself some tokens. This is probably better if I'm in Selesnya colors and I'm all in on the go wide plan and I have some ways to kind of pump my team. Then this gets to be a stronger card, but in a just general green deck, I could see myself not running this, at least a high percentage of the time. Colossal Dreadmaw, the card that just will not die. Is this the 3rd major release in a row where we've gotten a Colossal Dreadmaw? It was in Ixalan, it was in Rivals of Ixalan, it's in Masters 25. I mean, if they're running out of cards, I'll create some for them. I mean, all they gotta do is ask. But anyway, Colossal Dreadmaw is actually really good in the set. It's actually probably better in this set than it is in the Ixalan sets. Even though it's decent there in limited, it's actually a really good limited card. But here, there's not as many large creatures. Like, when you put this on the battlefield, this is actually a force in this environment. So if you got a 6/6 trample for 6 and you ramped into it a little bit, your opponent needs an answer. Now, granted, the downside is there's stronger answers in this format, so you're more likely to have this thing get blown up real quick. But if it can't go away, if your opponent can't deal with it, then they got a problem on their hands. 6/6 trample in this particular environment is very, very strong. And this is a very runnable card at common. Courser of Crewfix. Awesome, awesome card. I can't emphasize enough how good this card is, actually. And this is another one of those cards, newer players or maybe players that aren't familiar with it, they'll see it hit the battlefield, they won't necessarily consider it a priority, and then you just win the game. The advantage you garner from this is awesome. First off, for 3, you're getting a 2/4 creature, a nice little blocker. Aside from that, now you reveal the top card of your library. Sure, you're giving away some information, but I'm okay with that considering all of the rest of the things it does. And then you may play the top card of your library if it's a land. So this is going to help you move through your deck faster. Oh, and by the way, whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, gain a life on top of it. This is awesome to deal with like the aggro threats that are out there, especially from red, red-black, red-white. So this kind of shuts those down actually pretty intensely, which is pretty awesome. But even aside from that, just generally, this is going to give you such value with the life gain and being able to kind of move through your deck faster sometimes by playing the land that happens to be on top of the deck and moving on to the next card. It's just really, really incredible for 3 mana. Definitely a high pick, if not first pick in so many packs. And again, great combo with Azusa. Cultivate. Precisely what green wants to do, right? This is just classic green. Cultivate's a fantastic card. It is sorcery speed, but you get to search up 2 lands, basic lands. One goes into the battlefield tap, the other one goes to your hand. It helps you ramp up a little bit, helps you fix color. Perfect, especially if you're trying to go deeper in colors. Maybe you're splashing a color or going full on 3 colors. This will be awesome for you. Echoing Courage. First off, I want to say, before I get into trying to break this card as much as possible, this is just a good card. Like, don't feel like, especially in Draft and Sealed, you might not have a lot of duplicates. I mean, Draft maybe more so. You have some commons that you might have 2 or 3 copies of. And if at any given time you get 2 of those on the battlefield, sure, Echoing Courage can feel good for you. But even if that's not the case, hey, you know what? This is still a +2/+2 for 2 at instant speed. Nice little combat trick. Sometimes will work as removal for you. And green is lacking in removal when you compare it to black in this set, or white in this set, for example, or even red. So when you have options to find removal in green, you're going to want to look at them pretty seriously. This is one of them. Now let's talk about the magical Christmas land stuff that you can do with this card. Let's say you're in Selesnya colors, you got some token generation going, maybe some angel tokens, soldier tokens. Even in green, we saw insect tokens, elf tokens are coming up. There are different tokens out there, and keep in mind, token types also are token names. So if, for example, I have a goblin token, then 2 goblin tokens are actually named goblin. That is their name. So if I used Echoing Courage, both of my goblin tokens would get the benefits. So keep that in mind, because this is even better, of course, in those strategies. But like I said, even if you're not in those strategies, still a very good card. Elvish Aberration. I've been saying all week, these land cycling cards are amazing. This one, no exception. Sometimes the difference between having to take them all again and not having to take them all again is simply having this in your opening hand, and that's a big deal. So this smooths out those opening hands. More keeps are possible now with cards like this in your deck. Maybe a 1 of or 2 of is very nice in most decks. And on top of that, it's a good creature. A common, 4, 5, or 6 is awesome in this environment. And it also ramps on top of it. There's ways to cheat it into play earlier, and that ramp could be more consequential. Granted, if you play this on turn 6 or 7, getting to tap this for 3 green mana might not be that exciting anymore. But there are times it will still come in handy, and you'll see some larger creatures coming up too as we move forward. So yeah, this is awesome. I'd be happy to run this all the time, basically. Elvish Piper. Now, this is a card that can help cheat that last card into play and really take advantage of the ramp, but there's so much more that you can do with it. Now, it's a rare. You're not going to see it all the time, so adjust those expectations, but there's moments where you might be able to cheat in something really amazing, like one of the 2 Achromas, or perhaps Nicol Bolas, something like that. So, yeah, this card is hyper powerful. Very fragile as a 1/1, and yes, it does tap, so when it comes into play, it's going to have Summoning Sickness. It's going to have to survive the turn. Probably most of the time it doesn't. But maybe you could argue this gets a little bit better in the Golgari colors because black is going to have some graveyard shenanigans going on. So you could play a card like an Achroma or a Nicol Bolas that you're not even planning on hardcasting. Maybe you don't even have the resources in the deck to hardcast. And then between a card like this that could cheat it in, or if this dies, perhaps you're able to bring it back and try again. Or maybe you have a Zombify in your deck too to complement it. There might be different ways to go about actually reanimating or cheating the creature into play with this. And then you're going to find a lot of advantages just by kind of using the combination of the two. So yeah, this is an awesome card no matter what. Yeah, you can argue maybe better in some Golgari builds, but overall, fantastic card. Ember Weaver. All right, obviously you want to play this with red most of the time, but even if you're not, it's still good. Like a 2/3 for 3 with reach in this environment, again, feels very economical. You're going to be happy to play it. If you have a red permanent, wonderful. Now it's a 3/3 First Striker. That's actually really good in this environment. Epic Confrontation. Good removal spell for green. Like I said, green doesn't have some of the big punch removal like we saw in some of the other colors, so they're going to take what they get. This one, as you could imagine with green, is going to be dependent on board state a little bit, but this is still a very good card. Sorcery speed, costs you 2. You have to have a creature to target it, but there's so much you can do here because you can fight. You can use this to buff a creature, which sometimes is going to be relevant as well. Maybe fight something out of the way and then go in for an attack and just put it across some extra damage. Fantastic card, and these are common. You'll find them. Fierce Empath. Here's a 1/1 for 3, but it's got a good effect attached to it. You're not playing this as a 1/1 for 3, right? You're playing this because you can tutor up a creature card with mana cost 6 or greater. So, bottom line, you need a target. If you don't have a target for this, then skip the card, obviously, because you're not playing this, like I said, as a 1/1 creature for 3. You're playing this for that tutor effect, and if you have something in your library that's worth going to get, go for it. Again, I can imagine where this might be better in some decks where you're trying to cheat large things into play, like with the Elvish Piper or something like that. But just generally, if you're trying to grab a large creature and there are some targets here, then this will be good for you. Giant Growth, one of the best instants probably ever printed, as a matter of fact. And in this set, it's probably the best removal spell you'll find in this color. And I know it's technically not a removal spell, but it's going to act like one and feel like one most of the time. Whether it's offensively or defensively, you can really get your opponent with this and take out one of their creatures by surprise. Or you can just add extra damage, especially with some of the cards we saw in red that grant double strike and stuff like that. This card could be super economical for you for just the 1 mana. There's a lot you can do with this. You can argue maybe it's a little better in Gruul colors, but it's going to be good no matter what. Invigorate. This is a similar card in a lot of ways. Now, +4/+4. This time you're paying 3 at instant speed. A little more expensive, but you can certainly manage to swing it, especially for some of the possible big plays you could have, especially, again, in Gruul colors. But aside from that, you have the option sometimes of cheating this out a little bit by giving your opponent 3 life, as long as you have a forest in play. And yeah, granted, you're doing 4 damage. If you give them 3 life, you're only netting 1, but that's not what this card's about. This card's about taking out a problematic creature a lot of times and surprising your opponent that way when you're tapped out or something like that. Fantastic card. You could argue that maybe this is a little better, again, in those Gruul builds because of like the double strike mechanics that you see there and things of that nature. But still, I'm going to run this whenever. Iwamori of the Open Fist. Okay, this one's interesting. It's one of the uncommon legendary creatures. Only costs 4, although it's 2 on color. 5/5 Trample. Now, it's got a little bit of a drawback, though, because, I mean, at first glance, 5/5 Trample in this particular set at 4 feels amazing. But let's go a little further now. When this enters the battlefield, your opponent's going to be able to put a legendary creature into play if they have one in their hand. Okay, there's a little risk there, sure. You can't play around everything, though, right? Because, I mean, sure, they could throw down a Chroma, one of the 2 Chromas, or a Nicol Bolas or something, and you're going to be like, okay, maybe that wasn't very well thought out. But if they don't have a creature in their hand, then you're really getting away with one here. And aside from that, I'd be more worried about them having one of the uncommon ones. That's just more likely. And you got to think, most of those aren't going to be all that bad for you. I mean, some of them are good. Like Zada Hedron Grinder, I mean, that card's a 3/3. It can't really block this effectively, which is good. But also has a very powerful ability if your opponent's already gone wide or something like that. Aside from that, you do have things like Stang that could double block this, I suppose, and then you just kind of have a bunch of creatures on the battlefield. You didn't really get a true gain from this. So you do have to think. It's not always going to be incredible, but most of the time I think you're okay. And you can mitigate the risk a little bit by playing it at the right time, like a little bit later maybe when your opponent doesn't have many cards or any cards in their hand or something like that. And granted, I realize you want to get this out quickly and just kind of gotcha with a 5/5 as fast as possible. But sometimes, depending on the build you're up against, it might make sense to wait. Like if you're up against a reanimation strategy, for example, be real careful. They could have some crazy creature in their hand. If you're not against that, maybe the risk just feels not as bad considering the possible upside. Having a removal spell backup could work out sometimes too. Kavu Climber. Good card. I mean, it's a 3/3 for 5 that economically doesn't feel great, but it's not as bad in this set as others. But it does replace itself. That goes a long way for me. And this is a common. I won't go overboard with these considering they cost 5, but a 1 of I'd feel pretty good with most of the time. Kavu Predator. This one's a great 2-drop. I've said it throughout the week. You don't see a lot of 2/2s for 2 in this set. So when you see them, especially at, in this case, the uncommon level, so you can get maybe 1 if you're lucky 2 of these, this is just going to be a good curve filler. This is a solid creature for you. Now, does this ability ever come into play whenever an opponent gains life? Maybe, maybe not. If it does, bonus, but if not, it's still a very playable creature. Now, there are ways to try to exploit that ability, like Invigorate or Congregate in white, but be careful because you don't want to give your opponent life just to have this creature blown up. Krosan Colossus. This thing is a big uncommon creature, 9/9, but no evasion. A little bit awkward. It can't get that damage across easily sometimes, especially against a go-wide deck. However, the quicker you can get this card out, the better it's going to be for you and the more impact it's going to have. So how do you do that? Well, we've been talking about a few ways. Elvish Piper, some of the reanimation that you find in black, for example, is another way. Or perhaps Ramp. That's something else we've talked about today. Also, too, with these morph creatures, don't forget Cloud Shift exists in white. Granted, it's not something that might be always easy to pick up because it's a very popular card with a lot of versatility that could fit into a lot of decks. But if you can grab one in a draft or in Seal Pool, maybe you happen to have one, This could be a nice little combo for you. On turn 4, you're able to cloud shift it and flicker it. And of course, if you flicker a face down morph, it comes back face up. So there you go. And you could have yourself a turn 4 9/9 perhaps. That could be really good for you. Not always going to happen, obviously. And if you have to hard cast this later in the game, it's probably not going to feel as impressive, especially considering how much really good removal there is. So if your opponent can chump block a turn or two and try to find the removal, yeah, this might not do a whole lot. But at the same time, if you can give it trample, there's ways to do that. There are times where this card will be very, very good for you. Here's another big creature in green, Crozen Tusker. This one, again, an uncommon. And this one's a 6/5 for 7, sizable creature, but what I really like about it is its ability to cycle away in case you maybe can't cast it, if you stumble on mana. So if I cycle this for 3, a green and 2, I'm drawing a card and I'm also getting to find a basic land card and putting that in my hand. So I'm actually getting 2 cards for cycling this away. That's kind of nice. It replaces itself and I get another one. And aside from that, it helps me color fix perhaps, or make sure I don't miss a land drop, and that's actually pretty awesome. So very good card here. Living Wish. Okay, this one's interesting. I mean, it's a good casual card, but in limited games, draft and seal competitive games, remember that outside of the game is your sideboard, so the cards you decided not to use. And this only grabs you creature or land, so it further narrows the scope here. So the big question is, do you ever actually run this? I'm sure there's going to be some weird sideboard situation where you have a few good creatures and or land cards that might be good utility cards against certain matchups. And you say to yourself, you know what, if I find an opportunity in game 1 to bring one of these in before game 2 or game 3, okay, maybe Living Wish is going to be something I run. I don't think that's going to happen very often, though. I mean, an example of that would be like the Survivalist we saw earlier on. That could be something that possibly would destroy an artifact or enchantment. But again, if you only have one of those type of things, you would just play it instead of playing the Living Wish, right? So, I don't know. I think most of the time this doesn't make your cut, but every once in a while you might find an awkward, weird situation where it makes sense. Lull. Here's a prevent all combat damage type fog, and it can be cycled away, which is kind of nice. So that way, if it doesn't become something you need, you can at least cycle it, and I do like that. I'm not a huge fan of these type of effects unless I have them probably multiples and kind of try to exploit them multiple times throughout the game. In other words, maybe I have a lot of fragile creatures. This could be a Gruul deck that maybe is going a little smaller with some of the aggro red cards, or maybe I'm going wider with like the Selesnya deck, for example. And I feel like if I grab 2 or 3 of these in a draft, that there's a lot of times that I can kind of nullify combat damage and then crack back. And if I do that over the course of the game, maybe once or twice, I can get some real advantage. That's when you play this card, but like this isn't great necessarily as a one of a lot of the time. It's definitely not great in certain decks that aren't super creature heavy with small creatures. Like this doesn't matter as much when you're playing large green creatures, right? So you're not going to play this probably a lot of the time, but it does have a role. Master of the Wild Hunt. Here's a mythic, and it's a real good one. 3/3 for 4, nice size to it. And at the beginning of your upkeep, you get a 2/2 green wolf creature token. So if your opponent doesn't have an answer, you just run away with the board state just by putting 2/2s down every one of your upkeeps. That's amazing. Not to mention this whole removal thing where you can tap this and tap all your untapped wolves to have them do damage, and then that damage kind of goes back to your wolves, which your opponent chooses how that happens and all. So you might lose a wolf or 2 here and there, but you're taking out creatures now with this thing on top of everything else. It's just real solid. Like, this is another one of those cards that if it sits on the battlefield long enough, you just win the game. It's also worth noting that you can actually target your own creatures with this. It doesn't have to be an opponent's creatures. And there's a couple reasons you might want to do that in this set. A couple creatures that will give you tokens when they take damage. And if that's the case, you get to decide how the damage is dealt back to your wolves. Nettle Sentinel, another ahead of the curve card a little bit that green's getting here. A 2/2 for 1. Again, very good in this set. The drawback is it doesn't untap unless you play another green spell. If you're in green, then that's probably alright. And I would say, granted, if you're splashing green, don't play this. But if you're 50% green, 40% green, yeah, this is going to be a good card for you. Plummet. Plummet's awesome. And maybe you don't always main deck it because you don't know if you're going up against a deck that's going to have a lot of flyers, especially in this set. I mean, if they're like red, green, for example, you probably won't see a lot of flyers. But if they're white, blue, or even white, black, or something like that, there's going to be plenty of targets. And this does take out some of the more powerful cards that are actually in the set, some of your powerful mythic and rares. So you'll be happy to have access to this when the time comes. Presence of Gods. All right, this is a card we talked about a little bit when we were looking at blue. And it's another card that combos pretty well with some cards in blue. So we did go into detail, so I'll try to make it quick this time. But Long story short, if you have a card in blue like Horseshoe Crab that you can untap for blue mana, put this on that card, tap it, get the token, pay blue, untap it. As long as you have blue mana, you can keep doing that a number of times. That's actually kind of awesome. And there are cards in white that will give you a bonus for creatures entering the battlefield as well, which is kind of awesome. So again, that might be tough to pull off. I mean, 3 different colors, you won't see that all the time, but it's good to be aware of it. This also works well with Freed from the Real, because if you don't have the Horseshoe Crab, you can put it on a different creature. Now you're getting into shaky territory, though. Putting 2 auras on one creature, you know, that probably won't end well most of the time. But you never know. If your opponent's tapped out or something, you could find some advantages there to creating a few elf tokens or something like that. So it's an interesting card for those type of situations. Other than that, is it good just kind of on its own? Yeah, it's probably not bad, because there are creatures that you might have just as blockers or utility creatures that you're not planning on attacking with anyway. And then if you don't need to tap them for some reason that turn, you can tap them and create a creature, give yourself more board presence. Very runnable, maybe not in all builds, of course, but it's fine. I will say, though, always be careful with these auras. You don't want to get 2 for 1. If you target your creature with this to put it on and it gets blown up, that's not going to feel super good. Protean Hulk. Here's another combo card. We talked about Flash the other day in blue. It's a very famous combo, as a matter of fact. Because of that combo, Flash was banned in Legacy, restricted in Vintage. It's that good. These are both rares, so you won't see it all the time, but if you happen to get the 2 cards, wonderful. You use Flash, pay 2, put this into play, then immediately sacrifice it. When it dies, you get to go look for cards, creature cards with the total converted mana cost 6 or less, so you can put a whole bunch of stuff into play, or one big thing into play if you want to. So that's actually super sweet, but do you play this card fairly if you don't have Flash? Yeah, I think you still do. 7 mana for 6/6 is really good, and it's super persistent. I mean, if your opponent can't either exile it with like a Swords to Plowshares or tie it up with pacifism or something like that, if it dies, then you're going to find more value, and that's really annoying for your opponent probably. And they have to decide, you know, the 6/6 is coming at me. Do I block it with the 2/3/3s, or do I just take the 6? Because sometimes if they have enough life, they might opt to take the 6, and you get by with some damage with something like this just because of the ability. So it's a very strong card just generally. Rancor. This card is incredible. Just 1 mana. This is an uncommon. You'll be able to find these floating around. And it's also harder to 2 for 1 somebody with this card, because whenever it's put into a graveyard from the battlefield, return Rancor to its owner's hand, which is very nice. Now look what it does. +2/+0 and trample. This thing is powerful for green. I mean, look at these big creatures that didn't have trample that we saw today, didn't have evasion, like that 9/9. That 9/9 becomes game winning with something like this. Or maybe you're in red and you have the cards that could give something double strike. That could be amazing too. Or perhaps you just simply put this on like a 2/1 beater in red or in another color, and you just fight with this thing. And when it dies, you get the Rancor back, and you get to put on something a little larger next time. It's a very persistent, difficult card to deal with. Fantastic, fantastic card. Regrowth, very powerful card here. Sorcery speed, but for 2, return target card from your graveyard to your hand, so you can grab anything. Awesome. You could argue maybe a little better, again, in black-green, because you might be working more with the graveyard there, but this is going to be good no matter what. Stampede Driver. I really like this inclusion because it does a lot of different things that can help different archetypes. For example, you get this 1/1 for 1, and then if you pay the green in 1, tap it, discard a card, the first thing that happens is creatures you control get +1/+1. That's going to be good if you're going wide, like Selesnya colors, for example. Then it says they also gain trample. Well, that's great just generally for larger creatures, especially green creatures that, again, we talked about. That trample could be very helpful there. And also, you're discarding a card, which could work well in Golgari, where you might want to discard something that you're planning on reanimating. So there's a lot going on here, actually, and don't overlook this card. It has a lot of potential depending on the archetype that it's in. Summoner's Pact. This might be best in the Simic deck because it's an instant. It's a way to go and find a creature that could be a win condition. You do have to find a green creature, though. Keep that in mind. And you can kind of play this at the end of your opponent's turn for 0 mana and just surprise them, get something, and then hopefully quickly pay that upkeep cost. And it mitigates the danger of that upkeep cost if you wait until maybe your opponent's tapped out to do this and you know the coast is kind of clear, because I did warn the other day when we talked about Pact of Negation that you don't want to be in a situation where you play this and then your opponent blows up like one of your lands. Like they destroy one of your forests or something like that, and you're like, ooh, I can't pay the cost now. That's not going to feel good. So be smart about this. Time it well. Protect yourself a little bit or play it later when you have some extra lands. but it could be good for you. And also, don't miss the upkeep. That's going to be embarrassing. Timberpack Wolf. All right. This card is actually kind of sweet because it's a wolf that's a 2/2 for 2, but if you get more of these, it gets even better. So, do you play one of these? You sure do, because 2/2s for 2 are good, and they're actually kind of hard to find in the set. This one's at common. You might actually be able to grab this. If you find more copies, well, wonderful. That's even better. If you got 2 or 3 of these, you'll be pretty happy. But again, one of is still serviceable in this particular environment for sure. Tree of Redemption. Here's another mythic, and this one is very controversial. Turns out Mark Rosewater said this was a last-minute addition, so I guess I had to pull a card out to maybe put it in another product that's coming out soon, I'd imagine. That's usually what happens. And they went with this one as a replacement. Yikes. It doesn't have a lot of synergy with the set, unfortunately. In fact, it's a Nombo with Triskaidekaphobia, which is awkward. But do you ever really play it? You could, if you're trying to slow down the game enough. Like, I don't know. You could be in a situation where you're playing Simic, maybe, and you want to gum up the ground a little bit and protect yourself to get your land out to kind of control the board a little more. That's a thing you could do with this, I suppose. A lot of the times, maybe you don't play it, or you sideboard it in against an aggressive build, like a hyper-aggressive build, or maybe against a large green creature that you know might be coming out. For example, game 1, you saw like that 9/9 came at you or something like that. I guess you could put this in as an answer, but yeah, it's a little awkward, honestly. It doesn't do a lot with the other cards. Utopia Sprawl. I mentioned this one earlier. Again, this is the card that is going to combo with Arbor Elf as well as Freed from the Real to give you unlimited mana. Maybe you put it into a Wild Heart Invoker, which we'll see in a minute, and win the game. That could be a thing. But even if that's not a thing, do I ever play Utopia Sprawl? Yeah, you know what? Still a good card. I mean, you have to play it on a forest, remember that. But it's a green, put it on the forest, choose a color, and now from that point forward, it's a little bit of ramp as well as some color fixing for you. So you get to draw a green mana as well as the mana of the color you chose every time you tap that forest from that point forward. That's actually really, really sweet. A lot of decks will be happy to do that, even if you don't have some sort of crazy combo. Vessel of Nascency. This is actually a really solid card for a few reasons. First off, it's cheap. I love cheap cards. You can use this relatively quickly. But it's going to help you search into your library and go a little bit deeper. You look at the top 4 cards. You may put an artifact, creature, enchantment, land, or planeswalker from among them into your hand. So there's a lot of options there. You probably won't miss. You shouldn't miss, right, with something like that. I mean, unless you hit a whole bunch of instants and sorceries. That'd be awkward. So maybe this card isn't the best in Simic, but I still think it would be fine. And aside from that, you put the rest in your graveyard. So again, that plays well with Golgari because it's a way to maybe populate your graveyard a little bit. You can either recur those things with some of the cards we've been seeing throughout the week, or else maybe even reanimate. So yeah, really solid card. You could argue it's better there, but I think, again, I would play this in a lot of builds. Wild Heart Invoker. I've been talking about this one. The dinosaur's ears were burning there. But yeah, this is a 4/3 for 4. So again, even if you're not doing that trick with unlimited mana, this is still really awesome. 4/3 for 4 in this environment. I'll play this all day long. It's a common. You may actually see some of these floating around. And that ability, it's good too. I mean, later on, giving it +5/+5 and tramples, awesome. But also remember, it's not just this creature, it's target creature. So that could be even better, perhaps. You could put it on a creature that maybe has flying or something like that. Makes it even harder to deal with. So yeah, this is an awesome card just generally. And, 8 mana is not too much to ask. Just generally, I think, in the limited environment, but also in green where you have some ramp opportunities. Woolly Loxodon. This is a decent morph card again. 6/7, this time for 7, which is actually attainable. And you can even do the morph for 6, perhaps. And again, another target maybe for Cloud Shift, so another solid creature common that's very sizable. And like I said, in this set, common and uncommon, you don't see a whole lot of sizable creatures. I mean, green kind of has the monopoly on that, which is good if you're in that color. Alright, let's move into some green-white multicolor with Aladamri's Call. Instant speed, search your library for creature, reveal it, put it in your hand, shuffle. That's kind of awesome. I don't have to say a whole lot. I mean, tutors are good. Green has good creatures. You can do this at instant speed at maybe the end of your opponent's turn. Hold back your mana if you need to. This is awesome. If you get an opportunity to play this, and you have green creatures, and you're in green and white, play it. If you're not in those colors, okay, don't play it. But yeah, it's really good for you. You'll be happy to play one of these. Watch Wolf, another card that I kind of feel the same way about. If you get it, and you're in these colors, go ahead and play it. Again, so ahead of curve here, 3/3. Granted, it's 2 different colors, which can be awkward sometimes. Like, This isn't always a turn 2 play, depending on how the cards fall. Sometimes it's a turn 3, turn 4 play, but still, even if it's a turn 4 play, a 3/3 is not a bad turn 4 play, especially in this set again. Much like Timberpack Wolf, this is a good card to go along with Master of the Hunt too, if you're lucky enough to get that, but just generally, again, awesome card. Lower Scale Coddle as we move into Simic colors for these last 2 cards. Now, we talked a little bit about this a few days ago when we were talking about blue, because again, you can combo a little bit. There's some ways, especially in blue and red, to draw a lot of cards. Like you have the Quicksilver Dagger, Niv Mizzets there. So if you're looking for a way to take that card draw and pour it into something useful, this could be one of those ways. However, think about it this way. Whenever you draw cards, you may put a +1/+1 counter on this card. So even if you don't have anything tricky going on, you play this for 3, it's a 2/2. Pass the turn. If it survives, get your turn back. Draw for the turn, it's a 3/3. Let's say you play any draw spell in blue now, maybe a Brainstorm. I decide I'm going to Brainstorm for 3. I could even do that at the end of my opponent's turn. Draw the 3 cards, put 2 back on top. By the time I get back to my turn, this thing is a 6/6, right? Like, if you Brainstormed on your opponent's turn, drew your card for the turn, it's getting +4/+4. In counters, by the way, not like end of turn, in counters. +4/+4, you got a 6/6 creature for 3 by the time it's ready to attack. That's pretty amazing. And just remember all the different ways to draw cards that we saw in blue the other day. This is going to be phenomenal in those decks. And our last card, Mystic Snake. And of course, this again makes sense for Simic, right? Blue is very controlling, especially in this set. It's all about counter magic and drawing cards. This is a counter spell that also gives you a little pressure on the board. So your opponent has to start thinking about trying to break that counter lock that you have on them, right? So attack for 2 every turn starts to add up after a while. And then maybe it works towards one of your other larger win conditions later or something like that. But aside from that, that early pressure is never a bad thing. And also, it's just another counter spell for you. Really good card. All right, with that being said, those are all the green cards. And also, we've concluded the multicolor cards. Tomorrow, we're going to come back with part 6, where we look at all the artifacts and lands and wrap the set up. And Saturday, keep in mind, we'll be back, of course, with our regular Saturday Market Watch. But until then, hey, thanks for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe, and have a great day. Hey, thanks for watching. This video is made possible by the generous support of viewers like you on Patreon. Check out the description below for links to our Patreon page as well as our Amazon affiliate store, where a small percentage of all sales will also help support the channel. Finally, if you haven't had a chance yet to subscribe, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any new videos on Heroes and Legends. Talk to you again soon, and have a great day.